Yes. Right. Welcome back to our Annual Plan Deliberations Finance Committee meeting. We have some resolutions that people have crafted over the adjournment, and I think we're just about to have them up on our screens. I propose to go through the non-financial ones first, and I'm guessing they're non-financial. If it turns out in the middle of a non-financial one we have staff advice that it actually has got financial implications, then we we'll have another look. So in order of resolutions, the first one that we have there is one that I think Councillor Wilson would like to move.
Can I just explain? I haven't got a flood protection liaison committee in there. There could be any, but I think in light of subsequent comments about the flood walkways one, it may be better to be the Tari so that you can talk to the landowners and the cycle trails together. I, in some ways, didn't want to go down that line, but yeah. I don't see this as adding costs. This is about meetings that are already being held and bringing people in so that they're part of those meetings that are already being held, and councillors. It shouldn't, as far as I see it, be a extra cost. But I'm happy to hear from staff what they think about them. I've tried to do this before and I've failed miserably, so I'm trying again.
Okay, so the proposal today would be that it gets sent to another committee meeting where it can be thoroughly discussed, which is not for today. But the proposal is whether we would like to send it to the Governance, Comms and Engagement Committee. So, a seconder?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Councillor Hope seconds that.
Can we repeat it? I'll do this. Okay.
So, who would like to speak to that? This is the time for the discussions we want to be having, not just questions, but discussion.
I'd certainly support that, Councillor.
So, do you want to open the bidding apart from what you've just said, Councillor Wilson? Councillor Hall.
Well, I'm happy to talk to it, but I was interrupted then.
Yes. Sorry, do you want to start?
Yeah, if I may, sorry, I just, yeah, that noise put me off. Look, the Guardians of the Lakes indicated last week at the finance meeting that they were keen to have a liaison and talk about those things. Dean bus users, I think we can learn a lot from talking about that to the people that actually use the buses. This isn't the bus users support group. This is about us going and talking to those, or getting in to talk to us all, those people potentially that have good ideas about buses. And the other ones are about how we would set up people feeling like they know what's happening out there. I think Barry Wills's submission made me really realise that, well, we're doing some great work, it's not getting out there and it's not being seen because we're not using the people on the ground well enough to share that good story. And I think that the community are engaged, those that are engaged want to help, seriously want to help us do our job well, and they will be the better people on the ground to get that good wording out. I don't see this as a threat. I see it as a huge opportunity for us to be learning, and that's why I'd like us to consider them on the 30th of June.
Right, Councillor Yes. Councillor Forbes, followed by Councillor Robertson.
Thanks, Kate. The sentiment behind this, I really agree with, but it does look to me like every one of those groups are not our groups. They're external groups. So it seems to me you'd have to start with a request or an invitation to have us take part in those groups. And I think it's a little bit more complex than is written there. I agree with the sentiment. I'm not sure I can support the motion the way it is. I mean, what are you asking here? Are you asking staff to go out to these groups and ask them to provide us with an invitation?
Sorry. These are not those groups. I just said that. These are not the Dunedin Bus Users Support Group.
No,
this is
us. The Lakes is a separate.
Oh, sorry. And sorry, I appreciate that I got that one wrong. I'm happy to say that it to be the Lakes. The Guardians of the Lake is certainly a name, but the others are not anyone else's group. So I'm happy to say Central Lakes one.
Well, maybe we should be looking at liaison, being on liaison committees where we are the owner of the group as such. Because and there's lots of groups that possibly would, like Guardians of the Lake, I think would probably be really open to us being on there, but we probably need to ask them for that invitation, or they may not want us there.
I asked them the question, Dawn Robinson, the other day.
Hold on.
You asked Dawn.
Stop it. Over here.
Okay. Yeah.
This is a request for a staff report to come to another meeting. I'm just reminding you of that. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. Thanks for raising this, Kate. And yeah, I think mine is similar to Alexa in that I think this is a really brilliant idea. And the main theme that came out from me from reading the submissions was that people are, well, a lot of people are really interested to hear the good news stories of what we're doing and to engage with us and also have a way to see whether they can add value to some of our work programs. However, I feel that we have picked out particular themes here and some of them haven't actually requested this exactly. But I'm not trying to be raining on the parade because I do think that liaison with groups is really important. But I saw in the submissions many other examples where people have requested as well. For example, Yellow Penguins and wanting community definitely requested council to be involved in running biodiversity forums. There was one on air as well. Air quality theme coming through. There's just some of them. There are a number of other ones where community would like engagement. So I'm happy for this to come forward to that committee, but I think it's a broader discussion that was coming through on how ORC implements its work, celebrates that work, and ensures that community and our partners there are celebrated and involved and ensuring our work program going ahead is as effective as it can be. So, yeah, I think it's much broader than what is down there, and it needs to be planned for in a strategic and prioritised way. So this could be a starting point for doing that, but I do think it's probably something that the next council needs to be actively involved in and have a chance to form ideas rather than sort of coming up with 3 or 4 at the moment. Thanks.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, no, I agree with, the last few speakers and what Gretchen just said there. So, I mean, my preference would be that they didn't actually put particular groups down, but to maybe identify where are, our staff, are there opportunities to meet some of our strategic outcomes where liaison groups would be beneficial, and then as governance we could maybe add upon that. But yeah, to just focus on these particular ones, I don't think it's quite right, even though I think, Kate, there's a lot of governance agree with this principle, but not necessarily the detail. Thank you. So whether we change that motion.
In what way would you be proposing to make an amendment, Councillor Scott?
to withdraw to talk about, put in words like priority, strategic, and to withdraw the actual specific details, but to ask staff to come back with identify some strategic opportunities where liaison groups would be beneficial. So we have that holistic, and then we can add on to it potentially there at that discussion.
Would you be taking away the part of the sentence that says such as and finishing on
Yep.
leaving upcoming work programs, or
Yep.
would you, is that your proposal?
Is that right? Get rid of that there.
I think, yeah.
Councillor Wilson's motion, so she'll need to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just asking whether, would that
Yeah,
be what you're proposing?
I think so. What do you think?
Okay, councillor Wilson.
It waters it down. I'm happy to accept it if it's going to get it over the line. I think that I'm reflecting on what we've heard in the last 2 years, including the submissions and the ones that keep on coming up. But if it's going to make it go over the line, in which case you might as well get rid of 3, and this stuff ain't going to happen anytime soon.
Perhaps we want to hear from other people who want to speak to it, knowing that it could go either way. And once you've heard that, you can
Thank you.
decide, councillor Wilson, whether to withdraw the second part or not. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. I'd rather see those examples left in, whether or not they are groups that have identified that they want a councillor involved or not. I think the intent here, that the such as is the key word, because it's really just giving examples, and they are examples that Councillor Wilson believes would be of interest to have a councillor involved. So I like the thinking that they would be included. We might just need, or if she was willing, just to further identify them as examples, whether they're in brackets or, for example, was added as wording. And I like the idea then that the new council can then look to engage with those groups and fully explore the involvement they may wish to have with us. Thank you.
Councillor Malcolm.
Unmute. Look, I probably heading either way doesn't perturb me too greatly, but probably actually agree with Councillor Callaghan's sentiments that they are only there as such as for examples. And what I would hope that this would lead to staff looking at their, over time, looking at their total work program to see where they really do need greater community support, and using these as a vehicle, as a conduit to get that support from the community. So I think it could be a very positive step, but again, it will be not slower, but it will take time to evolve it. And again, making sure that we're not putting pressure on to evolve it too quickly and get the wrong solutions. But yeah, as a conduit for staff to look at, here's a great way to get that community involvement we're struggling with, and also to get that information out better. So probably very comfortable leaving it such as, and add such as for example.
For example.
Okay. Any further speakers before we get back to Chenroon?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I support the motion, and the reason being is that this organisation has had to grow extremely quickly over a relatively short space of time, and the reliance on a close collaborative partnership with community groups, stakeholders, whoever they may be, I think is vital going forward. We've done extremely well thus far, but we've still got quite a mountain to climb, and we need those closer links with these, whether the liaison committees or stakeholders or whatever, for us to achieve our strategic outcomes. So wholeheartedly support the motions.
Councillor Forbes, and can I just say, without intending to be rude in any way, that I think that once we're having a debate that we should leave staff out of it. Nothing personal, but I think that it's our debate once questions have been asked and a proposal has been made.
I support the sentiment behind this, as I've said already. I am not happy to include groups that aren't ours in there. So we need to take out Guardians of the Lake if we're going to have anything like that. Otherwise, they get to read in the media that they'll get an ORC council at their table, which may not please them all. So, and that's not our place to do that. So any groups that are ours, like, I don't know, Pomahaka River Management and Flood Protection, right behind you, Kate. But just take out ours.
Sorry, I've acknowledged that's a mistake and I've put it in chat and by email that I'm really happy that just be Central Lakes.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Deaker.
Yeah, thanks, Hilary. I too agree with a lot of the comments made by Councillors Kelleher and Robertson. I particularly thank Kate for putting this proposal in front of us. And I would support the motion the way it stands, except if I was a staff member and I had this request put to me, I would be really confused by the first part of this motion. It should, in other words, when it says as to how nominated community leaders and councillors work with staff, does that mean how they could work together or how they do now? And when it says their preferred timetables for meetings, who is that? Who has got this preferred timetable? Is it the groups we want to marry, or is it the members, councillors and staff who have preferred timetables? It just needs all clarifying. It's a jumbled set of ideas all pushed into one motion. And before it is sent to the committee, I would hope that that first 4 lines is made really clear. What are we trying to establish here? Is it what we could be doing? Or is it that we are doing now? Or is it the timetables that we want to see or the community groups want to invite us to? Those things need to be clarified, in my opinion. Thank you.
Right, now, if Councillor Robertson, you're talking to an amendment, I'll give you another chance to talk to it.
I wanted to question your statement that staff shouldn't be able to speak at this point. I thought it would be useful logistically to clarify whether the 30th of June is doable to do this work. Thanks.
I take your point. If that's what you wanted to talk to us about, Nick, go for it.
Yeah, that was the comment that I was going to make, is that that this is saying for staff to report back to the Governance, Comms and Engagement Committee on 30 June. We have to have those papers basically done in the next week or so. They go through the process, and staff weren't planning on looking at this. This is quite a wide communication topic, if you like. So staff were, there's a lot to consider in here, as Councillor Deaker just said. It's saying how we'll establish groups, but really you got to look at, when staff are going to do this, they need to actually go back and look at what the underlying issue is and what the problem is, and then look at the options and actually present that to you, with some considered opinion. Even to make something 30 June, it would be a big ask to do something that this is actually asking us to put in front of you a new proposal around how you actually operate with a set of various, if you like, subcommittees or working groups or liaison groups or whatever you call them. And we'd have to consider what that, if you went ahead with this, what that would actually mean. Because while you could go, oh, there won't be any implication for staff, there would be a huge implication for staff. because this is just creating a whole new sub-level of meetings and groups. And to do that justice, yeah, we would have to have staff drop everything else they're doing to get this into the agenda for 30 June. And even then, it would be a very rushed piece of work.
Goodness. Did you still want to say something to an amendment, Councillor Robertson?
I don't think mine would be an amendment, no. Yeah, no, I'd prefer to go against this one. I agree with Councillor Deaker. A change of date isn't going to do it for me.
You don't need to continue. Thank you. It seems to me that sending it off to somewhere is just a question of it's not the substantiveness of it, which would be discussed at a subsequent meeting. And I think the suggestions of issues and problems about even talking about it at a meeting, especially when some of these things we've had them in the past. I don't see them being a huge issue to set up, and it's something that people have been asking for and that may well help both the community and to feel that they're more listened to, and for us to understand. And I see it being a likely outcome of having us on some of these committees and groups being able to come along around the council chamber and champion what's going on, because often I think the right things are going on and we become a bit perhaps quarrelsome at around the council table because we don't understand. And if one of us was at a liaison group meeting, then we would understand more about what was going on. We would often be in a position to champion some of those things. I will invite Councillor Wilson to, having reflected on whatever she's heard in the last little while, to have her right of reply.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert. I'm happy to put it off for one other governance, comms and engagement committee if need be, but and I appreciate how the workload, but this is something that is not new to this council. We've had them before. The staff understand what these are, and I have to apologise to the North Otago rep for not including one that may be in his patch, but as he knows, he can already operate liaison groups and committees very, very well, and they operate in his area on the Waitaki. And to that extent, again, I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to look at how these work really well and actually get people on the same page. I am frustrated that this always seems to be one of the hardest things. This has been something that I have championed for 2.5 years, and I just cannot believe, given the change that we have gone through, and thank you, Councillor Chair Noon, for raising it, the amount of change that we've gone through, and yet we're not getting out the good message out there that we should be looking at some different way of doing this, and this is exactly how we could be doing it. It shouldn't be something that's feared, nor that it's seen as extra work. If we brought these people into our meetings that we have anyway, we could have we could learn a lot and be a lot more efficient. And I the only reason I'm like to put it off to the 9th of September is that I think we've got a lot of ones to get on the board immediately on the stuff, especially with buses. I think that's in a really challenging space at the moment. And my regret is that we put it off to the 15th of September. Thank you, Liz, for doing that. We won't get the best out of the opportunities that we've got for the remaining part of this term. And it will be lost in the wash of a new council coming in October.
Right, my apologies, Councillor Wilson. I noticed, and I didn't notice earlier, that Councillor Law's hand was up. So would you like to take the floor, Councillor Laws?
No, I was just going to ask a question related to So is the motion now the 30th of June or is it the 17th of September?
The 15th.
15th of September.
15th of September. Okay, thank you.
Right. Moved councillor Wilson, seconded councillor Hope. Maybe we have a division.
I will take you last as your chair.
So I think I said if we're only going to give those as examples, we should be taking number 3 out. Apologies.
This one.
Yes.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Wilson?
Yes, thank you. Apologies for that late amendment.
Councillor Jeker,
Aye.
Councillor Forbes,
I'm really sorry, I have to go against this, it's 2%. You know,
Councillor Hope,
yes.
Councillor Kelleher,
Yes.
Councillor Laws,
Yes.
Councillor Malcolm,
Yes.
Councillor Noon,
Yes.
Councillor Robertson,
No.
Councillor Scott,
Yes.
Councillor Wilson,
Yes.
Councillor Calvert.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-2.
Right, now the next one here is moved by councillor Wilson, hasn't yet got a seconder, which is request council to seek internal advice for consideration of better measures for climate change action for 2023-24 annual plan. Councillor Noon seconded that.
I'm happy to speak to it very briefly.
I just would like her to speak to it so I can
Yeah.
know a bit more. I'm a little bit
Yes,
lost.
it's
Could you, yeah, give
appears
us
to
an overview?
be not totally clear to people, but
Yes.
off you pop.
So
Councillor.
this is a submission from Brian Dixon, who was concerned that our climate change action KPIs weren't ones that were of great value in measuring. And I appreciate that Mike Rosler has told us that Mr. Rosler advised us that they will do this work anyway. But I think in respect to someone who spent some time to read it and give us some good suggestions, it's nice that we actually note his submission and act on it. And this is giving an action to that. Reading Brian's submission and staff agree with them that we can do better on the types of measures we're using. And so we're just reflecting that and doing that by way of emotion.
I don't think it's necessarily clear that what Mr. Rosler said they were doing is what you've asked to be done. Is it more useful to have clarified?
In response to Mr. Dixon's, was it maybe Dr. Dixon,
Yes.
Brian Dixon's submission. If you want to
When you say
try that
seek internal advice, I'm just wondering whether
well, the council will have to adopt the new measures in the 23-24 annual plan. I don't want this to be a piece of work that's sent out. I think it's something that can be done internally. And I think Mike's all over it. But I just didn't want it to be seen as an extra work piece, really, or needing any money. It is, yeah, I don't debate it, sorry.
did you recollect when you thought Mr. Rosler might have said that would be happening?
In today's meeting, when I asked him the question, in the first part of the meeting, he advised that they would be doing that. And I think they've got Francesco Hernandez working on that for the next annual plan. Mine is the reason I'm putting this motion is to reflect that it is happening and that we agree that it should happen, in support of a worthy submission.
Would you like to, so there was a time frame perhaps for the next annual plan consideration or something, so would you like to change it to notes that staff will bring back consideration of better measure to the
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Yep, that's fine. Very
about
happy with that.
notes?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
That should say staff. Still.
Okay, any speakers to that?
Councillor
Councillor Malcolm.
Am I unmuted? Yep. Look, I'm comfortable with that now because that's, I believe we're actually going to be doing that as part of the new work plan with our new employee anyway. So I think that's very good, but it does acknowledge the submitter. So happy with that wording now. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Right for reply, Councillor Wilson.
No, thank you.
Right. I'll move this motion. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Noon. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Against?
Carried.
Carried. Right. Right. Have we a seconder for this motion? And could you make it which implementation committee, Councillor Scott, please?
No,
Yeah, I'll second that.
I don't think I need to.
It's easier if staff are following our resolutions to know what it is we are asking them to do.
Okay. Well, can I ask staff? Staff, Gavin, is there a date that stands out for something like this, bearing in mind workloads and priorities?
This one is in September.
Is there a date, do you think?
I think Dr. Palmer had said when it would naturally come back. Did you?
Not sure, Madam Chair, I'm not sure I did. I'm just looking for my calendar of dates.
Oh, okay.
It would be helpful.
Cool.
But
Is there a date that stands out or?
well, I don't have that right now. I need to take a moment to.
I sort of recollect that earlier you said that we have an annual review of the pest strategy and that it would come back to us in September or something like that. Or am I imagining things? Is it a different thing?
So there's two things going on. For implementation committee next week, you've got your quarterly update on environmental implementation activity, which includes some biodiversity discussion. And that's where you can talk a bit more about biodiversity strategy and HOE and those sorts of things. Separate to that is the annual operational plan that describes how we give effect to the regional pest management plan. The operational plan for 22-23 is being worked on right now, and it'll be brought to the first implementation committee meeting in the new financial year. So that's a separate one. Then the third element is this one here, which is separate again. I'm happy to bring a report, just a matter of the timing around that. If it's September would be fine.
Okay, well, September, you have it. Okay, there you go.
And if I understand it correctly, I think it's more of a discussion around strategy, strategic considerations. It's not bringing the strategy, but it's just progressing this issue and providing a basis for some discussion by council on that matter.
Excellent. Would you like to speak to this, Councillor Scott?
Yeah. I thought it was I see you've deleted, Liz, the example,
Did
but
you want that
yes,
kept in
yes,
the
please, because it
resolution?
provides, otherwise you can look at this and get a bit confused about what it means. Is it rabbit control groups? What's actually going on? Because it's actually upper level. And I'm wondering whether support was supporting, just to make the English better. I would say it's currently support.
Don't think that should have something in the middle of it saying question mark. It's not a good resolution. I'm not loving it. I'm not saying I don't like the outcome or anything. I'm just saying as a resolution, this is a request, instruction, whatever, to our staff, and that explanation is not doesn't give our staff a good steer on what you want.
I'm happy with it. Is the seconder happy with it?
Well, they're two different things.
Yep, I'm happy with it.
It doesn't make it a good resolution.
Oh, okay.
Our job is to provide
Yeah,
good
you're right.
resolutions.
How can
I'm not
we
saying you shouldn't
decide?
have an explanation. I'm saying that description.
No, so Halo isn't, yes, but Halo is working as, because of pest-free Dunedin.
It should be predator-free Dunedin, which has the contract with ORC. Halo does not.
Okay, delete the explanation then. Have you got the picture? Gavin? We'll have a discussion. What you actually
Overview
meant.
of regional community pest
Okay,
control support.
Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I was just trying to, sorry, took a bit of time there. I was trying to reword something potentially to try and understand what the question is. Dr. Palmer explained that we have a pest plan and a strategy in around that. So that's the biosecurity sort of element. Then we also have a biodiversity strategy. And then we have things like our Eco Fund and ways that we support communities. So I'm trying to understand what is the question that Councillor Scott is wanting answered. Is it...
Well, maybe we'll put the explanation back there. Because
yeah, but I still don't understand it really.
Okay, well, I'll explain
it. It could be really clear, I think.
Okay, well, I'll
Chair
explain
Calvert was getting at that as well, I think, of what is it we're trying, is it how, trying to understand how ORC currently supports community pest control groups, and how does that align with our strategy, or is it trying to create a new strategy? I'm not too sure.
Well,
does Dr. Palmer understand what he's been asked to do?
My understanding is you are wanting some discussion about how you might go about making decisions on relatively big biodiversity investments of other people at the moment. And so you've had a submission around something, and what I heard is, how do you form a view on where that sits in terms of priorities and other things? And are you actively encouraging these things or responding? So what I envisaged we could do for you is bring a paper back and just have a bit of a discussion around that. It's not the strategy or the investment criteria, but it's also explaining where this might fit in the bigger picture.
So
if that's what you're looking for.
Have you got some better words just to describe that?
It sounds like he understands those words to mean that. And that is what you're happy to for them to mean.
Well, the resolution should be reflect.
Yes.
Got any suggestions there, Gavin?
So perhaps it's something like it's really a discussion piece, I think.
Can I speak?
Councillor Laws.
I mean, if we're getting staff to write our resolutions, then we've got we've got problems, haven't we? At the moment, we have a strategy, we have a plan. We have both of those in regional pest. We've had an explanation that there's going to be a new plan coming to us for the next financial year. And I imagine that will include a review of what we've done the previous financial year. That's the regional pest strategy which Councillor Robertson's talking about. So I entirely agree with her sentiment. if Councillor Scott is saying, well, I want to up, in this annual plan, the amount of involvement that we have in things that we're not currently involved in, i.e. the Southern Lakes Sanctuary idea, then that's an entirely new resolution, which would be treated separately. So at the moment, it's nonsensical to have something that we're already done. So we're forming a resolution for that. Let's review how the strategy or the plans worked over the previous 12 months and what's it going to do over the next 12. That's one entirely different thing. That's normal business. And then the other one is the explanation that Councillor Scott's given is he's looking at Southern Lakes Sanctuary. Well, for God's sake, make a resolution on that. But at the moment, by putting those two things together, they are not the same thing. And putting them in the resolution together doesn't make them so.
Okay.
Look, like we're playing with words there, and I haven't, apologies, maybe I haven't got my words right, so I'm not trying to be smart or anything. I'm not talking about the current biosecurity strategy. I'm talking about the potential funding of big community pest control projects. And that's where I had, for example, we're currently funding Halo, and we've had applications from the Southern Lakes Sanctuary wanting support. And what I'm asking for is some regional overview of these funding opportunities long-term. And for example, why are we funding Halo as opposed to Southern Lakes? Can somebody answer me that?
I think if what you want is, I think there's two bits. The second bit is, are we doing the right, funding the right things and whatever in the space? And that follows on the first bit, which is what is our current situation. And I think Dr. Palmer very nicely summarised what he thinks you want as the first bit, as to whether that leads to you deciding that you want to put something to council about funding differently in the next annual plan or whatever. It starts with what are we doing now, which is that question moment, isn't it?
I want a strategy for funding large community biosecurity projects.
Well, that is not that resolution.
Yeah.
That's not that resolution, not only that, but
yeah,
it's,
no, I've got it. That's what I said.
Yeah.
That's what I want. Jesus, we spent a lot of time going around in circles, guys. So can I change, and I apologise, my wording should have been better before. So can request a report be brought to the implementation committee regarding a strategy for funding large community biosecurity projects.
okay, could we then park that, because that is a funding thing to go into the annual plan. That is not it's not a non-funding question, it's a funding question. So let's shift that to the funding part of our discussion. At the moment, we're dealing with the non-funding part. Councillor, who have we got? Malcolm, or are we therefore just going to park this and shift it? I think we should do that because we can't deal with it in the middle of this. And then I will ask staff to comment when we get to that point on whether they have any idea what funding implications that might have if we are putting it in the funding part.
May I ask if we're going to break for lunch? It's 12:02.
Yes, we are going to break for lunch. When would we like to do that? We've got
have
a meeting at 1 again, and
12:45.
And 12:45, we've got an important.
Should we do a 12:15 lunch till 12:45?
Yeah, okay. 12:15 break for lunch.
For half an hour,
For
30 minutes.
No, we want to adjourn till after the council meeting at 1. So at 12:15, we will break until after the council meeting at 1:30.
Sorry, the
Yeah.
council meeting's at 1, but
Yes.
Yeah.
probably be about 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Next resolution, councillor Wilson. This is request staff consult along with councillor representation with landowners. That should probably, and I'm, councillor Deepa can help me here, that should probably say request staff along with councillors consult with landowners and cycleways. Have we split out something?
Double, yeah.
Councillor
Very happy with
Deepa?
that.
Is that what you're wanting, councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thank you very much for your wordsmithing there, Chair.
No.
Yeah,
like
I'll see if I get a
that?
seconder.
I will second it, but I think that.
Put your mic on.
I'll second that, councillor Wilson, if we can change it, because I don't think it should just be Torre and Clutha. I have to think about. if there's anything
Actually,
up
there's
Clutha.
probably no flood infrastructure anywhere else, is there?
Well, there isn't.
There isn't.
No.
Dunedin already has a lot of it, already
that's
provided.
right.
So is it
The
every
basis-
flood infrastructure?
Yeah,
Alexandra.
that's what I was thinking too.
Oh, Alexandra, yeah.
Alexandra?
So maybe.
You want to
It's
just
only
stop
a kilometre long.
construction?
Yeah, yes.
Just get rid of that.
Yes, that would be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to support that now.
I'm happy to delete that, and then in which case you should possibly put flood and drainage. Although I think it's on, yeah.
Happy, councillor Hope, second that.
Yeah, that's better.
Would anyone like to speak to this?
I would.
Councillor Wilson.
Look, and the reason why I made it Torre and Clutha is those are the only two groups that I know of that have contacted us in the last year and a half to look at flood infrastructure or drainage infrastructure as walkways. So that's where that was in, and it's fine if it's not there, but it does make the next bit very hard to consult with landowners because you're going to have a much bigger pool. And I haven't had any requests for cycleway or walkway. So I thought there was cycleway and walkway, it should have been. I haven't heard of any applications in Alexandra or anywhere else other than Torre and Clutha. So that's why I did narrow it down to make it easier. The reason I'm putting this motion is that I don't want staff to consider all of their flood and drainage infrastructure when they do this, because I think that's a hugely complex issue. If cycle and walkway proponents only want X, Y, and Z, then I actually think that that's all we should look at in the first instance as a policy, because it may resolve a whole lot of unnecessary thinking about possibly dams or stop banks that are more sensitive, or gates. I'm making up. Yeah, I'm thinking about things that I wouldn't even want to go and consider walkways on. So if there is no suggestion that they would want to be going through really highly sensitive or cross highly sensitive infrastructure, then we actually probably don't need to have a policy on it at the moment. I think what we want to focus on is what is the demand and what is the real issues that and narrow down the staff work. So that's where all I'm doing is trying to narrow the staff work and ensure that if possible, and ensure we don't get them to go and look at stuff that isn't necessary.
Any other speakers? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I think this is really useful, but I was wondering whether or not Dr. Palmer, what he said earlier on, and whether or not sometimes the council will determine almost a bottom line for some areas. Yeah, we're going to just decide that the integrity of the flood bank is such that we can't have these types of developments along the top, and set those bottom lines, and then perhaps do the consultation from there. I think that's what he said. So I'm wondering whether it's valuable to actually hear from him on what we were planning to do in terms of looking at the policy on how we utilise this infrastructure, so that we understand that and then can then go into the conversations, so that we don't lead people astray as well. Because I do think I do agree, Kate, it's going to be brilliant to have that conversation. I'm just one with the community and the people involved here. Great work going on. We want to be part of that, but is it a staging, or can we ask the staff whether or not this is we want it to happen, but is it better to do our own work first?
I think this is a political decision, and it falls back into the
I think it's a technical one
for us to decide. Generally, so what I'm doing at that stage is saying I don't think we should ask staff whether we ask people before we develop a policy. Doesn't say anything about the policy particularly. Councillor Kelleher.
Thank you. I support the motion. I do think we need a prior motion that basically says that we will undertake our exercise as suggested by Councillor Robertson to firstly identify any go or no-go situations from our own perspective as owners of these assets, that we would then from that know which ones we would discuss with other proponents and the landowners. So I agree that there needs to be a prior step, and I think that needs to be a staff report to us first. Thank you.
Would you like to draft that amendment, Gary? Or would you like to encourage Kate to, if she can do it more quickly than you? Then while we're doing that, we can hear from Councillor Malcolm and then Councillor Scott.
Okay, I can have a go at drafting that.
Yeah. Look, I'm pretty comfortable with what Councillor Kelleher is proposing, but I would see that even this current motion would be that anyway, and it is probably the conduit for staff to talk with the proponents and the landowners on the actual barriers or the parts of the schemes that seem to be fit to use. So I would say that this would be a really good first step to actually discuss with the people who have got these really good ideas, but in fact they could be impractical because we can't use those particular ones. So the concept's really good, and I thought, without even that proposed motion that's coming through now, staff would have those preordained that bank A is not suitable to put a bike track on, and this is the reasons why we need to look at other options. But I'm happy to support both probably.
Was it Councillor Scott?
Yeah, and my question is to Kate, is whether the word developing should be changed to completing. So request staff consult together before completing the policy. The fact is that the policy has been in the development stage for quite a period of time, and it's looking to be completed this month. And so it's basically done most of the development, but there's a final stage to take that draft work and to consult with landowners and to do various work. So my question to you, Kate, is there merit in changing that word developing to completing?
Saying before completing development of, perhaps?
Yeah.
I'm happy with before completing the development of. The problem is I don't want it to be a consultation at the end and not really get anything or any input. I think, going back to what I said before, I don't want staff to go down a whole track of thinking about an area that is not even going to be considered for a track and putting that up as a reason not to do it. I think we should just focus on where people want to go, and I don't think there's been that meeting of the minds of where are we actually talking about. Because if we're not talking about for example, the contour channel, although no, I don't think it's flood bank actually. Why have a policy that covers it if that's an outlier that has a different concern? I just think there's a conversation to be had, and the landowners certainly deserve to be in that part about what their constraints might be.
Okay, Councillor Kelleher, in light of Councillor Malcolm's comments, are you comfortable that, and especially again in light of Councillor Scott's comments, that resolution encompasses staff sharing with the people they're consulting with the reasons why some places just aren't suitable at all or whatever? Or do we need to add something in?
The engineer in me is still worried that these are assets, they have critical purpose, and yeah, I think staff, in my mind, need to be firstly advising before we start those discussions. So sorry, yeah, no, I'm not comfortable.
Yep.
Have you drafted your extra piece?
I have, yep, and it's in the chat.
We pause for a wee minute and get it up there, and then if people are finished with this debate, we will move to.
Hillary, if I'm happy with Gary's as an amendment. If it suggests, sorry, and I just want to wordsmith it, that we request staff to prepare a report on the potential sites for public access to flood and drainage schemes. I think that's where he means for, as opposed to ones that would be that you wouldn't want public on. Is that how it is?
Yeah, that's fine.
Gavin? It's hard. Yeah, on potential sites for public access.
Happy?
It's a positive action as opposed to a negative one.
Yep, I'm happy with that.
I can second it.
I'm happy to accept it.
Have you got a question about that, Mr. Roessler?
No, just a comment. I just want to make it clear that the LTP has no specific funding for a role in cycleways, other than the operational funding for an operational policy, which is what Gavin has referred to. And you've just got to be very careful about the scope of what you're thinking that policy is. And I think Gavin was alluding to that as well with his comments. In other words, a policy that starts scoping out into a strategy, which is something that would require funding because it's quite a major new thing that you would be asking staff to do, a new activity, being a recreational type activity. So just sort of
what we're dealing with here is a reminder that in this non-funding part of our resolutions, that this is a policy that's being developed at the moment in any case and is within our current things, but actually doing something as a result of that policy is quite a different thing, and we're not implying any funding at all for anything further than what's up there. Don't think it takes us anywhere further in the funding department.
Yep.
Everyone had their tuppence worth? All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Or any against? Carried.
We
will now adjourn until 1:30. Do we need to move a motion adjourn? Can I just adjourn?
I'm happy to second.
Moving. Councillor Hope seconding. Adjourn till 1:30. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Aye. Will we need a new Zoom link?
No, we can use the same one.